Tonight we are discussing discussions. So, not only are we discussing discussions, but we had a discussion last week where we discussed how people behaved in discussion and debate, and there were different types of discussion that you could have. And it's the way you present yourself, your arguments, the way you could listen to your opponent or attack your opponent, etc. So we're going to be discussing discussions and debate styles tonight, and we're going to be focused on two. Now, I actually did a little bit of look into this ages ago when we were thinking about doing a Fresh Air podcast about argument styles, and we never ended up doing it. And there are actually tons of different ways, although some of them are essentially the same as each other, except one is written versus one is spoken. So, for the sake of tonight, I think we're going to focus on the big two being dialectic and eristic, but we will cover other bits as well. So, Dave, do you want to take things away for us?
Okay, so when we have a discussion, there's two. I mean, there's more, but with regards to what we're discussing tonight, there's basically two forms of discussion that you can have. There's the discussion where you're attempting to put across your point of view. You're telling the other person this is how they should think. One way of calling it is a monological. So it's a monologue. You're speaking at the person rather than to the person. And we see this a lot in the atheist community, where when they talk to a religious person, they'll even turn around and say, well, this is what religious people believe. You believe this. And the religious person will say no. And the atheist will say something like, well, I was a Christian before, so I know what you believe.
Yeah, and similarly, we also, just for balance, because we do try and be balanced, is you have the same coming back from a theist. Well, you're an atheist, so this is what you believe,
Yep.
and so it happens on both sides. But we are more addressing a lot of the atheist arguments in general, because there are a lot of atheists out there that are overly negative towards everyone that doesn't think the same as them. And what we're trying to do is create a good conversation between all sorts of people, regardless of your ontological position. Sorry to interrupt you there, Dave, though.
That's right. I was going to mention about how theists do it as well. They'll say, well, atheists believe evolution. Atheists have no morals. And they'll talk at the atheist rather than talking to the atheist. Now, that can be considered a monological. And that's also for written arguments, where the argument that's being written is designed to teach someone something or argue for a particular point. Now, there's also dialogical, which obviously comes from dialogue, where the dialogical conversation is one where it's an actual dialogue, one where it's a two-way street or multiple way street, and it fits in with what could be called the discourses. Now, Foucault defines the discourses as all the discussions centering around a particular subject. So all the discussions centering around evolution would be the discourses of evolution. So a dialogical would intend to be involved in a dialogue with those involved in those discourses.
That makes sense. So, you'd use those the way that it's done. That could be used regardless of whether it's written or spoken. Basically, yeah.
And these sort of match up with other classifications of discussions called Eristic and Dialectic. Now, the Eristic discussion is, or it's an argument, it's one where people are arguing for the sake of arguing. They're not arguing for any other purpose than to say, slay the opponent, or as lots of YouTubers like to put, debunked.
Yeah, not a genuine debunker.
Yeah, it's that would be considered heuristic because it's arguing for the sake of arguing.
Mm-hmm.
And a dialectical discussion is one where both people aim to come to some sort of truth. They have an actual discussion with each other. They might be coming from completely opposite ends of the discourse, where, say, an evolution denier and somebody who accepts evolution. But they're both agreeing to have a kind of what Wittgenstein would call a language game, where they're playing a game where they're trying to come to some kind of truth. So maybe even meeting in the middle. Or even if none of them moves position, they've at least had an honest discussion that attempts to come to some kind of truth.
At the very least, they now fully understand the other person's position. So if you were talking about maybe a creationist and an evolutionist having that discussion, the creationist might have come in thinking evolution is only a changing kind, but they will have actually listened to the evolutionist and gone, oh, okay, so this is actually what you think. This is the process. I still don't believe it, but I understand I was wrong by saying that it's just a changing kind. That was a misunderstanding on my part. Maybe I'll go and think on this a little bit more.
Exactly. And let's put it in the form of a discussion that we generally have with other atheists, in that atheism isn't just a lack of belief in gods. Atheism is also defined in various different ways. Now, many of the discussions that we have are people just going, nope, you're wrong. You're wrong. Atheism is just a lack of belief in kind. You don't know what atheism is. Whereas we also have those who go, okay, well, this is how I'm using the term. It's quite popular online. It's quite popular with atheists. The way you're using it might be a correct term, but this is why I don't use it. And that would be a more dialectical conversation.
Yeah, no, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Another one that we commonly have is conversations on morality. And you get some people who argue for the sake of arguing. They'll just sit there and go, no, it's subjective. No, because it can only be this. So you're wrong, wrong. And we're trying to explain, no, these are the different ways you can look at it. And then you look at this and you look at that. And some people, again, will pick it up and go, oh, okay, no, I do understand how that can work. And even if they don't necessarily agree with it, they at least understand the thinking behind it. And again, you've reached that accord. And the same thing with the atheism discussion, as you mentioned, oh, okay, yeah, I understand there's different ones. I'm using this one because of that, rather than, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I know the more eristic conversations or arguments are popular among atheists because there's this need to, like, especially from YouTubers, the debunk YouTubers, and there's a need to just reach an audience, get fans, get Patreons, get donations, make money, and prove how atheist they are, and prove how dumb theists are. So they just approach it from this monological or eristic angle, where it's just yelling at them, mocking them, telling them how bad they are. But what you really want is a dialectical conversation. You want that conversation where you both agree that you're going to try to come to some sort of conclusion, because if the point is to change somebody's mind or make them see something differently or anything like that, you want them to listen to you. You want them to attack your view and show them why your view can answer these attacks. And you want to be given the chance to attack the other view. So it's unfortunate that most arguments go the monological way or the heuristic way when it comes to atheist and theist discussion.